Today I'm just going to be making a devlog about my experience making a game in Unity so far. Now, as you can see, I've already started. Okay, I've added a bunch of stuff. This is pretty much like the first week of game development finished here, but I want to go through day by day what I completed, go through the code, um, and just show you what I was able to get done. So the first day of progress here really was the environment and the player controller. So as you can see, this grid is actually a part of a 2D function of Unity, the 2D tile map. And it's a rectangular tile map that's just rotated on its side. So normally when you make a 2D game, you're looking at the camera straight on, well, you're looking at the environment straight on like this. But what I've done, I've taken that 2D tile map that you normally fill with sprites, I've turned it on its side, and instead of using drawing with sprites or pictures, I've actually gone ahead and drawn with game objects. So to do that, I have my grid make a grid layer. So this would be normally like a tile map layer where you overlay different sprites. And then in the brush section here, instead of using a like sprite brush or whatever, I use a game object brush. And then from here, you can put any game object as the brush. So in this case, I created a prefab folder, put some just generic geometry here. This one I made in, all the geometry here I made in Magic of Voxel. So that's just a free 3D modeling software that works based on voxels instead of vertices, like in Blender, for example. So here I can easily add game objects to the grid like this. It's super easy to build a level. And then I can do this for each layer. So if I want to build on layer 2 then, I just select that layer, have the brush selected, and then I can draw on that layer. Same thing with layer 3, layer 4. And I've just found this is a really easy way to build a level extremely fast. So the next thing here is I implemented stairs. So if I actually pull up the stairs into the scene here, and let me just change the transform so you can see them. So these stairs, I learned it's actually really hard to make a stair collider. I was like, oh, there must be a built-in function to make stair colliders in Unity, surely. But actually, not really, from what I've seen. What I ended up doing is giving it, childing a bunch of game objects, and then putting a box collider component on each of them, and then I just make the box completely flush with the object, just basically approximating. And actually, in this case here, hey, look, I found a bug. I may as well fix that right now because it's not something I caught the first time I made this. So there you go. I'm just going to update that. Wow, that's the benefit of going over things in a game dev sort of way. Find all your bugs. So hopefully that doesn't impact the ability to walk upstairs. Okay, so apart from placing stairs, I can also rotate them. So I'll just go here, instead of having them be 90 degrees, I'll switch that to 0. And as you can see, now they're facing the Z direction. So I just quickly made that up on the first day. Another thing I created here was the player character. So if I go back to the inspector here, now player character took a lot of tweaking, but what I ended up doing is freezing rotation, and I actually manually control the rotation just so that it maintains a sort of 2D illusion. So now as you can see, instead of the rotation being controlled by something else, I manually control it in a script so that the character only moves in 45-degree increments. And I intentionally designed it this way to give it sort of an illusion of a 2D retro game. So I have some enemies that wander around the map randomly, and if I go up here on this geometry, you can see one. Right now it's just using a nav mesh on the scene to patrol, and if I go to the scene view, I can show you the nav mesh. So he'll only follow a path if it's on the nav mesh here. And the way I made this work is he'll randomly choose a point around him that's on the nav mesh, and he'll take a second to get to that point. And when he reaches that point, he's going to look for a new point within a random distance and a random direction. So he can either move one of 8 directions, a random distance, and that's just simple patrol script I created. Now for the following script, once he reaches a certain radius around me, he's going to start chasing. And you can see I made that little jump animation there. So he basically chases me. He wants to get as close as possible to initiate combat, so I'm just going to drop off this ledge so he can't do that. Well, I'll explain it a little more. The way the chase works is a bit more complicated. So what I actually had to do was calculate, using some trigonometry, what the closest 45-degree angle would be to the pre-calculated path was, so that I could figure out which direction to move the enemy in when he's chasing you. And of course I have a couple fallbacks for when he loses tracking, and a couple rotation handlers so that he's always facing a 45-degree angle. But it ends up working pretty well that whenever the enemy catches sight of you, he'll chase you, and if you get too far away, he loses tracking and goes back to patrol mode. Now, if an enemy does catch you, he's going to initiate combat. Now, the way this combat works, I have it set up so that when he reaches a certain radius to you, depending on which direction the enemy is chasing you from, the camera actually rotates. So if you look here, my camera was originally positioned somewhere like this, but when the battle started, the view of the camera switched around. This is just because I always want, in the combat, I always want the player to be on the left and the enemy to be on the right. So even though it sort of breaks the immersion of a 2D landscape, I think it's a cool effect. Now, what I'm going to do with this combat system, you'll have to wait and see, but if you want a spoiler or an idea of what it's going to be like, you can look at Mega Man Battle Network. I'm trying to go for something like that. I just think that mode of combat is very fun and it's not really utilized enough. And of course, I think it's going to fit with this sort of 2D isometric exploration really well. Another notable thing to mention here is that I have a pixelation shader on. You might have noticed already, but when I start the game here, you'll notice that the 3D model basically turns into a sprite. That's done with a very basic pixelation shader. Here you can see if I change the value to something really high, it increases the resolution. So now if I zoom in, you can see, oh yeah, it's a 3D model. I can also change the width of the pixels and the height of the pixels. If I do something like this, the resolution will be very good in one direction, but very pixelated in the other direction. As you can see here, the arena also matches the terrain. So if I have stairs going down, I can move down the stairs, or if there's a block in the way, I'll be blocked by it. So as you can see here, I initiated a combat right next to these stairs. I can use this block as cover, or I can move up the stairs in the same sort of grid pattern. So as you can see, when I'm on the grid in battle mode, it actually aligns me perfectly to the stair. And that way I'm just not floating above the stair when I'm moving between elevated objects. I see a lot of potential with this game demo I've made, so I'm hoping to continue development on it in the long term here and make it into something really interesting. I'll create another devlog video once I've added something else substantial to the game, and I'll go over more of the coding of how it all works. In this video, I more gave an overview of all the things I added, but in future videos I want to show exactly how all of the coding was done and all the logic works. So until next time, thanks.